Good evening. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is October 27th. Our regular panel tonight includes Doug Sartori, Don Merrifield Jr., and myself, John Lidke. How you both doing tonight?
Great.
Unmuted and very good. How are you?
Very good as well.
You caught me off guard. You're usually not that quick, so
I wanted to get right into it tonight. If you're listening and you support us on Patreon, thank you so much. If not, head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We are in BizX Magazine and at bizxmagazine.com. We have a new column that's coming out for November and December. We talk about the Festival Plaza redevelopment and some of the wrenches that's been thrown into that as well. So it's a pretty good column, I got to admit. And Rose City Politics broadcasts live on tape thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. We've got 3 topics up for tonight. Council calls for more options on Riverfront Festival Plaza canopy. So you're going to be getting a little sneak peek of that column there, I guess, tonight. City of Windsor has launched new budget engagement tools in time for the 2022 budget, but act quick because they're killing the tool in mid-November. And the Stellantis news makes launch of Windsor Works even more important, according to Mayor Dilkins. So let's jump right into it. City Council has voted almost unanimously that administration should work with a consultant to develop different costing options for the final detailed design of the new Festival Plaza canopy and overhaul. They want that vary in price and once completed, undertake public and stakeholder consultations on the designs. It has taken years to get to this point with the design, which went to council last month at an estimated $32.5 million. Ward 3 Councillor Reno Bordelin brought forward the motion, and it calls for administration to create a detailed plan that ensures the canopy project has connectivity with other aspects of the riverfront and downtown areas. The Ward 3 councillor also hopes that the outcome will see the removal of a proposed pedestrian tunnel under Riverside Drive, and he expects administration will have a suite of options for council to consider early 2022. So this is sort of like the never-ending story here with the Festival Plaza. I didn't think that we'd be seeing it completely get as thrown off course as it has been now. Near unanimously, it's a big blow for, I would say Mayor Dilkins right off the bat, who really wanted to usher this thing through quickly. We saw councillors Gignac and Francis both offside him, which was, pretty surprising to see. It's not that things are set in stone, but it was interesting nonetheless. And, this fits directly in with the Windsor Works report, even though it recommends to be careful and cautious when undertaking these decisions, advocating almost not to do so. But it does note that, our riverfront is is the crown jewel that we have here in the community. So Doug, I'll start with you. What's your take on, the long and the short on this?
So there's so many places to go with this. I'll start with the substance of it. I do think that this was a good decision of council. There is an appetite in the community, I think, for the finishing of the Festival Plaza. I think we've heard that from folks. And the other thing that we've heard is a lot of sticker shock on the price. The 32 or 35, the $32.5 million proposal. That was my concern with it. Not that, we shouldn't finish the plaza and create a bit of a better environment for events. But I just never understood why this is the one that we would gold plate and why this deserved the level of overinvestment that $32.5 million represents compared to other things, other priorities in the community. So I think it's good that council will get a number of options to consider. I'm not sure why that's not a best practice in general, why there isn't a good, better, best option provided more often when spending opportunities come to council. But overall, I think it's good. I don't know if you want to give Don a chance to weigh in before we start to talk maybe about the politics of it, but that's my view on the substance.
Well, to give my Reader's Digest comments and not ruin what comes out in BizX, because I'm sure everybody's just waiting with bated breath to hear what I had to say in the magazine. Yeah, I think the price tag is a big deal. $32 million. I believe you brought it up when it was last week or 2 weeks, and we seem to be talking about this every week. That's almost what City Hall cost, the new City Hall. So, again, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you should certainly try to make it a venue that you can use year round and get some type of capital return on your investment. So, again, I'm sure I said this the last time we talked about this. If you're going to do it, and close it and make it something like a, year-round market or year-round something, so that, there's no point in spending $32 million just so you can, get 6 more concerts down there. It doesn't make any sense. So let me ask you guys a question. I'm curious on this. So this has been in the works. I guess it was initially, was it 4 or 5 years ago that they wanted, a report coming back from whatever company they hired to do that, which was obviously the previous council. And now that it's come to fruition and the report's there, and not everybody, but it seems like council has taken, in my mind, a responsible approach to this. Like, hey, do we really need to spend this kind of money on a project like this? Do you think when this all first started, when everybody was rah, let's go, do you really think the actual support was there from the city councilors? The ones that are still there, because even people like Councillor Gignac have been pushing back, and she always seemed to kind of just fall in step with whatever was going on from the mayor's seat. So I think it's interesting that now that, I don't know if it's because there's a new council or if at the time there really wasn't the support for this kind of thing from the get-go, because it all seems to be falling apart in my eyes.
So I'm not sure what you mean. You mean the like, why did it take so long to come back?
No, it's like, obviously they gave the money and put forth, okay, go to the consultants and draw something up and give us some ideas. What was that, 2000 and, was it 4 years ago they started this process?
I feel like that happened in 2019. So it would have been in this council, I think.
Oh, was it? I thought it was started like 4 years ago, they said. I could be wrong. Maybe I misunderstood that. It seems different. Like, the whole dynamic down at city council seems to be changing. And for a lot of these things that, okay, that's 2 years out. Do you think maybe it's just the pandemic? Maybe it's the fact that, the wallet's getting a little tighter and money's a little tighter. So people are being responsible, fiscally conservative, one could say. It just seems it's weird that, yeah, rah, let's go with this. And then it finally comes out and everybody's like, okay, hang on. Why are we going so fast?
Well, if I remember correctly, the price tag that was attached to it at approval, the estimates were about half that number, something like $14-15 million. So I think there was sticker shock when this came back at 32. And I think that part of the intent of that motion is to get a range of options that would include what was kind of originally envisioned when it came before council before. But I want to talk about the stuff you alluded to in terms of the dynamics on council. I find that really interesting. And when we get into the Windsor Work stuff, we're going to find that there's a similar dynamic happening. And that is that councillors Gignac and Francis are seemingly offside with some elements of the mayor's agenda. Both, I would say both of these issues, Windsor Works and the Festival Plaza, are kind of signature issues for this mayor, things that, he has put a bit of capital behind. He has put a bit of effort behind getting these things passed. And in the past, think back to the previous term on council, the 6-4 votes, you could pretty much sit there ahead of time and know where the votes were going to land on any given thing. And Francis and Gignac would be reliable votes for this mayor. And I can't quite put my finger on what's changed, but there was an exchange, and we're going to deal with it later when we get to Windsor Works. But there was an exchange between Gignac, Mayor Dilkins, and Jason Rayner that was surprisingly heated, and heated debate, I think, is a good thing. Passionate debate, differentiating between different positions, I think that's all good. It just surprises me to see these particular players seemingly offside with each other, when in the past, a lot of times it seemed very coordinated when things would happen around the table. Francis, Gignac, Sleeman would be counselors who, seemingly had a role to play, and there had been some pre-gaming in terms of, figuring out where everyone would come in and where the motion would come from and so forth. At least that's the appearance that it had, which is very, very different from what we're seeing here.
Yeah, the old council divide seems to have finally disappeared. The split on council, we kind of had Team A and Team B, and that seems, and to go completely off topic, is it very disconcerting that I can see my head behind you the whole time while you're talking? Because I can't, it's really, I'm going to start doing stuff. That's all I'm saying.
I did not realize before we started recording that you would be able to see your own reflection behind me.
Yeah, all I can see is my head over your shoulder, like I'm about to murder you or something.
It's scaring me too.
Well, it's the Halloween season. But yeah, I do. It is very interesting to me that what would have been a lockstep together, we're in this together kind of team approaches really seems to be fading away, and I have no inside knowledge, and I don't know why this is happening. Maybe the election's coming, and maybe maybe some people are looking at different seats. I don't know, but it is very odd that coalition has fallen apart.
My take is, with COVID, we got a lot of sticker shock from a lot of things. I mean, it's impacted everybody in different ways, and be honest, Ward 1 and Ward 6 with Gignac, their voters are very different than from downtown core voters. Far more concerned, I would say, about fiscal realities. And what have we had recently? We had the mayor push forward a plan for redevelopment of 80 Knox. Come hell or high water, we're on for up to $30 million if we don't get any grants with it. There's now the debate about the streetcar still, and it's in the millions of dollars. And now I think I agree with Doug, like it was a real sticker shock. They had thought it was going to be half this price, and now it's come back. It's a lot more money. And I think the two of them, Councillors Francis and Gignac, they can go, this doesn't benefit me. This doesn't benefit my ward. It's not in my ward. How am I supposed to sell this to my voters? And I think they just don't care that they're offside from Mayor Dilkens. And we're seeing that ideological divide show up for how the reality that it is now.
Yeah, so I think I kind of agree and I kind of disagree. I think you're onto something, particularly when you're talking about the ward politics. Fred Francis is the councillor for Ward 1. Joanne Gignac is the councillor for Ward 6. And I think there is probably a sense from both of those councillors that their ward wants to see fiscal conservatism. Their ward wants to see a control on spending, unless of course it's a new Roseland clubhouse or fancy streetlights in Southwood Lakes. But if it's not something that would directly benefit them, then they're pretty skeptical about the spending. But focusing in on Ward 1, I don't have the figures in front of me, but Mayor Dilkens significantly outpolled Fred Francis in Ward 1. That's at least my recollection, that Fred Francis's result was a lot weaker in terms of total votes. John, you're furiously typing, so I hope you're fact checking me as we speak.
Absolutely.
So I kind of question that, and being on the ground in Ward 1, which I live there, but also I work Ward 1 in elections at every level of government. And there is a lot of warm feeling towards Mayor Dilkens in Ward 1. There is a deep reservoir of respect and support for the former Ward 1 councillor. And I don't think that there is quite the same level of affection for Fred Francis, and it's borne out in the vote totals. So I got to think that if Councillor Francis is calculating that a hard line, fiscally conservative message is the way for him to secure re-election, then I don't totally agree, because if you look at just look at the numbers and look at the facts, Mayor Dilkens has a deep support in Ward 1. And you would think that being on board with the mayor's agenda would be politically valuable for you. So I'm still left scratching my head, although I do think that, and again, when we get to Windsor Works, I think we can talk about this a little more. I do think that Joanne Gignac had some comments that are kind of illuminating. Many of her comments, Councillor Gignac likes to go down memory lane. She likes to talk about how things were done in 2003 and 2006, and the things that they did in this year and that year. And one of the things that I sense from Councillor Gignac is a real interest in protecting her legacy and protecting the legacy of previous councils and maybe of the previous mayor. And one of the things that I think makes Councillor Gignac a barrier to progress sometimes is that doing things differently would be repudiating what has gone before, and she really resists doing that. So to the extent that this mayor is taking a different line than he did in his first term, and I think he is, and to the extent that he is creating a different legacy for himself and pursuing a different agenda than former Mayor Francis, I don't think that either Gignac or Fred Francis are totally comfortable with that. And I think, at least in Gignac's case, a lot of it has to do, or some of it has to do, with how she sees her personal political legacy tied up in what that Francis Council accomplished.
Yeah, and to go off of that, I think if we look at John can be our fact checker here, but in the last election, Darcy Reno ran, say that 3 times fast, against Fred Francis, and it was a close race. She did well. She wasn't that far behind, but she kind of went with the message, especially on the Roseland thing. Like she went more fiscally conservative in that campaign than Fred did, and one can assume that Darcy will probably run again. And so maybe he is going down that route where, look, if I approve all this spending like crazy, it's going to be easier for my competition, whether it's Darcy or somebody else, to call me out on it. And, maybe it's a losing strategy for him.
So Fred Francis won pretty convincingly. He had 52.9% of the vote in Ward 1, 3,500 votes. I don't have the poll by polls in front of me, but I really think Mayor Dilkens had many more votes than 3,500. Darcy Reno had 2,167, 32.7% of the vote, a more than respectable result, especially for a first-time candidate going up against an incumbent. But 1,400 votes is not nothing. And I'm not sure how worried Councillor Francis is about his re-election. Maybe he sees a vulnerability there, but I think, not that I would like to give political advice to Councillor Francis, but I think in this case, it is way too late for him to change direction. His biggest political liability is that he is a completely one-note councillor. He has one thing on his mind, and that is pinching
the Grand Mayor stitch.
Well, that didn't go very well, John.
It's not a ditch, it's a linear park. There's very big difference.
Yeah, in investments in shrubberies in the ditch aside, Councillor Francis's one message is fiscal responsibility, squeeze. And I think that's a far bigger risk to him than being potentially trumped by another candidate who can argue that he has not been fiscally conservative enough. If anything, I think Councillor Francis, his vulnerability lies in his one-dimensional approach and his lack of nuance when he approaches these issues.
So there you have it. Doug Sartori thinks Darcy Reno is the Trump candidate against Fred Francis. Very good.
Let's leave that one there and go on to the next topic. I think that we've
sure. Well, and one more quick comment.
Yeah.
We all know that when they say it's going to be $32 million, and they know it's going to be $50 million. So if you are going the fiscally conservative route, I mean, this is a huge number that's going to come out, and you're going to have to defend that in the next election.
So, I'd love to see some data on that, Don, on what the cost overruns for projects are. I know it happens sometimes. The City Hall was one where there were significant overruns, but do you think that really happens with the kind of frequency like that you think that you can just tack on a 50% premium onto every estimate because that's where it's going to land?
Seems to be the case so far for any big project since I've been back in the city. And I don't have a spreadsheet, but just
okay. All right. That's your perception. Fair enough. I just, and I don't have a spreadsheet in front. Well, I have spreadsheets in front of me, but I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me. So I can't make a counter argument. I'm just expressing a little skepticism there, buddy.
Come to the cynical side of the world, Doug.
Well, we know that it happened with City Hall, and we know that it happened with the Aquatic Center, so we can hold out and see whether we'll be going for another one, go for a turkey with these.
Well, with the Aquatic Center, we're paying $3 million plus a year that they said was going to be a break-even point. So
I would love
ever
for someone to put a microphone to Fred Francis and ask him whether he thinks that those annual losses at Adventure Bay are acceptable for the city. I would love to hear his take on that. There definitely are some items that if you're a fiscal hawk and you're very, very concerned about the, doing right by the taxpayer and making sure that you are always thinking about the bottom line, there are curious lacunae in his perspective that there are just some places that he never goes. You'd think that $3+ million a year losses at Adventure Bay would be something that a guy like Fred Francis would be all over.
It's handed to him on a silver platter and he doesn't jump on it. And well, it's because it's his buddy, the mayor, who pushed this thing through. That was his baby, and look what we got.
Yeah, sports tourism, man.
Rosemary's Baby is what we got. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This I find to be just such an interesting topic. So it's been asked for by many for a long time. City of Windsor has decided to launch new budget engagement tools in time for the 2020 budget. So you can go and check these out right now, but you're going to act quick because they're going to kill these tools on November the 12th. The budget simulator will allow you to adjust the city's 2021 approved property tax funded operating budget by increasing, decreasing, or maintaining spending for various city services across the board. Once users make their adjustments, a colored pie chart is updated to reflect the percentage of spending on each service. Users are able to adjust each service to a maximum of approximately 10%. I used this. It was pretty fun to be able to go through and, make your ideal Windsor budget, massive cuts here and huge increases in spending there. Doug, did you try it out? I mean, I did. What do you think about it?
I did. I think it's a really interesting tool. For the record, I increased taxes $10 million. If anyone wanted to know where my priorities lie, but I think it's a good tool. It's pretty comparable to similar budgeting tools that you see across the province. In the pre-show, Don and I did a little tour of the city of Guelph's old budget forecasting tool, the simulator that I think was one of the things that got held up as an exemplar, and it's very, very similar to this tool. There's a couple of differences. One difference that I think is interesting is that the capital budget is included in the Guelph tool, and I'm not sure why the capital budget was excluded here. I think it's a bit of a glaring omission that it would be way better if we had everything on board. But I felt that there's, it's good that we have this. I think it's a great tool to engage people, but it's a little vague. it's pretty high level. It's hard for me to imagine, as as a resident looking at this tool and trying to figure out what my priorities are. If my priority is, let's say, I think that we should have more sidewalks and streetlights in the city. I'm not sure that I'm communicating that when I tick the slider up a bit on one particular item. I'm not sure that I'm able to communicate exactly what my priorities are, but that's a quibble. I think this is a huge step in the right direction. This is something that people have been asking for many years, and I think it's going a long way to making for a more inclusive budget process, and something that residents can engage in and maybe have a little bit better handle on what is being debated when the budget comes around next year. Did you have a $10 million tax increase, Don?
Funny enough, I did not. I actually decreased, because you can only decrease the budget in any department. Was it 10%? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So I decreased everybody's budget 10%, gave it all to the police only for tank purposes, so we can get new tanks on the streets at all times. So yeah, it does.
Jokes good, Don. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we all have our thing, right? Yeah, I agree with you. It is a little vague. The capital budget thing, which is, I believe it's more than half the budget, isn't it? Or at least half.
It's around half. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting that, because included in capital budget would be things like new libraries and new blah, 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 that they don't want us even having the option of commenting on those. I did notice in each of the little slider things, there was a spot for notes. You could put notes in. So I expect Bruce Road will have motorcycle only designated speed limit free lanes any given day now. So yeah, look, we had nothing before, and it's been, we've been doing this show long enough to know that we've talked about the Guelph one many times, and why can't Windsor, at least participate, the citizens participate a little bit. We did that democracy show last week where we scored very low on consulting the public about, priorities in the community. So this is something, it's better than nothing. But yeah, I think some of the quibbles, as it's a Doug word, quibbles. I don't use that in my own language very often. Yeah, I think it's valid, but it's a step in the right direction. If you've been living in the dark and you get a street light for the first time, you think you've come to the future. So that's where we're at.
Now, they also released a tax receipt generator, allowing you to input your 2021 municipal property taxes and generate an estimated tax receipt showing a breakdown of how your tax dollars are spent. Either of you use that one?
No, I did not.
Yeah,
no, my taxes are too high already.
I'm interested in the priority setting exercise. Not so interested in knowing that I spent, $52 on parks or whatever it is. I'm sure that that's going to be attractive and valuable to people, and some people are really going to like it, but it didn't grab me.
So it's being killed, they note on the website, on the November 12th. What's your take on them just taking this thing down? I understand it's reflective of the current budget, but don't you think there's use to keep this thing up in perpetuity? It's not like it's taken up a significant chunk of data on the city's website.
So the question is the budget going to drop like 3 hours before Christmas like it usually does? Or when is the budget supposed to come out? Anybody know?
No, I'm not sure. Don't have that.
Remember all the shows we did where Councillor Boredom was always complaining he got 3 binders on his porch like 2 weeks before Christmas, and had to vote on everything. So yeah, I was going to ask you guys if you know why November 12th. Why are they killing it? Doesn't seem to.
No idea. If I can ride a hobby horse for a minute, I think generally speaking, I don't like to see short-lived digital stuff. I think that it is better when we keep things around for a long time. Again, the pre-show, we went and looked at the Guelph budget tool. We actually looked at the tool from 2016 because they still have that up on their website. And I think there's some value in in keeping things around. I think that it builds confidence in what people see on the website when it is it's archived and kept for a long time. Who knows why? Maybe this is a service that is being paid for over time, and it's not something that they felt they wanted to continue to pay for after November 12th. I think it's a reasonable amount of time to have the thing up, but my preference would be for it, once a tool like this is put in place, that it just stay in place and not be removed. But it certainly is a fairly decent amount of time. I mean, it's at least 3-4 weeks, right? So it's a decent amount of time. I don't think it's the greatest crime ever, but I think it's better if this kind of thing has a life and sticks around on city websites, so that 5 years from now we could go back and talk about this tool when they never bring it back, or when they bring the quantum version out in 2028, we can, God, are we still going to be doing this show in 2028? Anyway, we can talk about that from our porch swings or whatever. And Don's retirement village, we can go back and talk about it. We won't have that opportunity because it's going to be gone.
I'll be zooming in from Boca to do the show on Wednesday nights. It's and in Windsor's defense, it's weird that they would leave this tool only up for a little while, because we elect tools all the time and they stay there forever. Rim shot, anything? Come on.
That was good. I'll allow it.
Thank you very much.
So Blackburn does report that it cost $23,000 for these to have been implemented. So we don't know if there's ongoing fees that are still necessary, if that was just to have it created, but just wanted to point that out. Now, what I did find most interesting is Mayor Dilkins in the Blackburn article is quoted as saying, if the vast majority of the city all of a sudden says, we want you to invest $100 million in whatever they say it is, it's going to make myself and city council look, evaluate, and say, is it reasonable? That was interesting. So, I mean, they're data mining here. That wasn't something that was, it doesn't say that on the city website itself. You had to glean this from a media interview with Mayor Dilkins. Do you buy that? I don't buy it. I don't think that they're going to be looking at these caring one way or another what people say.
Oh, I don't agree. I think that there will be a report that comes back to council. It'll probably be on the agenda, so we'll all get a chance to look at the statistics. I think there's a level of cynicism that is not productive. And with all due respect, John, I think you're in it with that comment, because the city provides these tools for engagement. They are going to pay attention to the responses. That in the past, when the city does engagements, when they do consult the community on stuff, that's always a highlight of the debate. It's a big part of the debate, is what were the responses to this or that survey? What did people say? What did people not say, et cetera, et cetera. So it may seem like nobody's listening, but I think it's really important, especially if you feel that your voice is not reflected in the decisions of city council, it's really important for you to stand up and be counted and identify, your views on something like the budget. If 10,000 people in the city use this tool and expressed a desire for the city to go in a different direction, the city council would be crazy not to pay attention to it, and it would create an opening for challengers at the next election that people don't want. So I think it's legit. I think it's something that people should engage in. And if you don't think your voice is heard, I have 2 tips. 1, do the survey, and number 2, put in a Ward 1 postal code and pretend you're from Ward 1, and they'll really listen.
There will be no linear parks in Ward 1. That's my comment. Let's go the other way on this. Let's say, budget deliberations come out at city council, and they refer to this tool quite often, saying, well, we got this priority from, the survey. Any concern that next time around, people, and especially special interest groups, will start manipulating this tool, much like an online poll for AM 800 that we endlessly kind of make fun of? Is there a way for certain segments of the population to actually manipulate this and get what they want by, basically overloading this tool and making it seem like there's a lot more people interested in X, Y, or Z than actually is.
Oh, you mean the AM 800 Daily News poll?
Yeah. So this will be, the city's version, and everybody, cuts the police budget by 20% and wants, golden archways on every street, something like that.
I'd like to introduce a motion to have Don stop using the word tool. Can we call this a simulator instead? I think that would be a lot better.
You started with the tool, and I'm kind of just working on it there.
But
I think Don brings up an interesting one with the police budget.
No, I actually think Don's point is really well taken. Anything you do, anything you do, yeah, clip and save, guys. Anything that you do online, just ask Bodie McBoatface. There is a risk of brigading. There is a risk of, concerted efforts to make one particular outcome happen. There is a concern that, potentially interest groups even outside the city could engage. So I think at some point, we have to think about how we can both protect the privacy of residents and at the same time ensure that that these simulators and other tools for community engagement are used effectively and are being used in a way that is consistent with the views of the community. When you want to attend one of the newfangled Zoom ward meetings, you actually have to identify who you are and where you live in order to attend. And some people might be a little taken aback at that. If you want to physically walk into a ward meeting, there's no one at the door checking your tax bill to make sure that you live in the ward or even live in the city. But I think online engagement requires a little bit more gatekeeping. So I think your point is really well taken, Don, and it's something that the city should consider going forward, is how to ensure that that these kind of products are used with integrity.
Yeah, you don't want them getting railroaded.
No, and I'm not just a tool making tool jokes over here. Sometimes I say things that are valid.
So there was one that really stood out for me. I went, I'm going to go and reduce the mayor's office budget. That's the first thing I wanted to dive in with. And I found it interesting. It has city council and mayor's office budget in a combined. So no way to go and actually express that you want to cut the mayor's office budget specifically. So
yeah, if there's any cuts to that line item, the city councilors are going to have to bring their own pens at some point, because they're not cutting the mayor's office. It's going to be city councilors have to drink their own coffee, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And
people said it was on the tool, so we have to do the will of the people.
Thanks for bringing that up, John. It's always a good opportunity to remind folks that we have the most expensive mayor's office per capita in the entire province.
Well, I mean, we're well served for it,
if you say so.
It is an obscene fact. But with that, let's move on to our last topic of the night here. Stellantis news makes launch of Windsor Works even more important, says Mayor Dilkens. City Council approved the Windsor Works report last week, and with Stellantis dropping the second shift at the Windsor Assembly Plant, possibly just temporarily, it's making implementing the report even more important, says Mayor Dilkens. We know that this was put together by a UK-based consulting firm, Public First, for $400,000, and now it was unanimously passed by council in February, costing $2.99 million over 3 years, and it envisions eventually hiring 12 to 14 dedicated staff for it. So I don't know where we want to go with this one. We don't need to really dive into the full components of it. We've talked about that before on the show a number of times, but I guess this spending here is maybe a good place for us to look to, because it does break down that $2.99 million and what is envisioned. $500,000 for a comprehensive study to get the city's airport lands shovel ready for development by industries and other uses. $165,000 to create a funding portal to help businesses access grants and other financing. $50,000 to study whether Windsor should hire a film officer to attract movie and TV production. $600,000 to develop a communications plan. $75,000 to study how to better coordinate with Detroit and Michigan economic development offices. $150,000 to study the creation of a venture capital fund. $150,000 to increase the city's community improvement plans, which provide incentives, including tax rebates for residential development. $150,000 to renovate long vacant office spaces on the ground floor of the Goyo Street parking garage and do a commercial hub for startups. $50,000 to study the creation of a tech hub, and $200,000 for doing collaborative research with the college and university. What's your take on the spending, the priorities here that are listed? I mean, we talked about this in the pre-show. Pretty surprised here to see that shovel-ready development of the airport lands. This was something that just sort of came out of nowhere here, and now it's wrapped up in that. But Doug, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. I didn't realize how big of a chunk of the anticipated Windsor work spend that was. On the one hand, it makes sense. If you want to attract major employers and you think that that's a strategic place where they may be interested in going, it is conveniently located near the airport, so you can imagine a lot of different things that might potentially go there and be an asset economically to the city. But I wonder why that needed to be brought in under the auspices of Windsor Works, and why that would not be a separate item brought forward at council. It just seems to me that with only a few $1 million to play with, there are other items that might have been beefed up, that perhaps would have been, be able to be beefed up. And you would think that if a study of the airport lands is needed, that would probably pass at council as a standalone item. So it is a little curious, but perhaps there are reasons for it that we're not thinking of. What's, and we did talk about this last week, and I think we had a pretty good conversation about it, and now we have the benefit of having watched the debate play out at council. And I think my biggest concern here is not so much the money or even the ways that it's being distributed. Things like the venture capital fund aside, which I think is a real bad idea. But overall, I think there are good things in the Windsor Works report, and there are not so good things in the Windsor Works report. You could make the argument that more of the good things than the not so good things have been brought forward to in this particular item to be studied and move forward, and that's good. But I think where I land on it is that I personally, and I try not to be a cynical person, I'm just really suspicious of our ability to execute this stuff, and I hope to be proven wrong. They are talking about bringing in a whole crew of people to plan and execute this work, but call me cynical, call me a naysayer. I'm just really skeptical that we can do it, that effectively, this money will be used effectively. But yeah, that's where it is, and I've got lots to say on the politics of it, but those are my thoughts on the substance.
Okay, well, to go on something Doug said last week, it's the highest line item on that whole budget is communications. So I think that's where the politics comes on, is selling this plan. The 500,000 for to do a study of development out in what it basically is the Sandwich Southlands, where the proposed hospital site is, seems ridiculous, because they've had development plans out there since, Jesus, I think the 1990s or early 2000s was the first one. And they've been for years installing sewer lines and things like that, and expropriating property to put all these parcels together around the airport. So yeah, without details, it seems odd that they need to spend $500,000 of this puny little budget on something like that. To me, it feels like he's trying to to me, it feels like the mayor's trying to work the controversial, I guess we'll say, development of those lands into a Windsor Works kind of project. Like, well, the consultants told us we should do this, so we're doing it. And I did it, rah, rah, I win. So I think there is some politics going on out there. You know, from a real estate standpoint, we already know what the lands are zoned for. People have been buying property out there, certain developers and certain people in the city ever since the proposal was announced. So I think people are ready to go, and they are, if they have plans, they've already got basic plans. I do think developing the airport lands, you know, on the other side of County Road 42, you know, we can go back to Mayor Francis standing out at the airport doing announcements about all these logistics companies that were coming down, until somebody told the logistics companies and they said, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. But, you know, in the wishful thinking days of, you know, the economic depression, yeah, I mean, if you look at those lands, it's a great idea. I mean, there was a proposal to put that, or there was an idea of having the train yard, which is downtown on just off Crawford there, moving that out towards, you can make that all, you know, a logistical hub for every form of transportation and have it all in one spot. So, you know, I think there's plans out there. I think there's ideas out there. Seems to be a little bit of politics. I don't know why. Like I say, I just don't know why we have to spend $500,000 to, you know, figure out what we're going to do with those lands, because I think what's going to happen is going to happen already.
Yeah, there's got to be a sense of urgency, though, wasn't there? And you probably have more of the details than I do on this, Don, but wasn't there an expropriation adjacent to those lands just in the last couple of years?
Yeah, there was one, I believe it was one house, and it was a pretty controversial story. There was the last, I think the last family out there where they were expropriating this land. And obviously they were arguing over price. And I remember at the time, some counselors going to ask me some questions on value on that property. And yeah, so I think that was the final piece of the puzzle right around the time that I think they announced that that's where the hospital was going to, you know, that's where the proposed hospital is going to go. So I mean, that's kind of my point. It seems like they already had a plan and knew what direction they were going in. So I don't know.
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, you don't do an expropriation on spec, do you?
No,
like you wouldn't think that you just like go and
we're just going to appropriate this land because one day we're going to do something with it. Well, and you know, sadly, joking aside, I mean, I'll bring up a perfect example. A friend of mine, real estate friend of mine, their family used to own the Top Hat restaurant downtown, and that's where the Burger King is now. And at the time, city council, I think the mayor was Mayor Francis, and Fulvio Valentinas was the Ward 3 councilor at the time. And they were trying to sell the property, and they got pushback from council, and council was denying approvals for certain things about the developers wanted to buy it. And the thought and the reason the family received was, well, we have plans for that property. So it's as ridiculous as it sounds. It's not outside of how the cities operate to say that they have plans for property they don't own and don't tell people about it.
With your indulgence, folks, I want to share a clip from the council meeting on this item because I think like this is going to tie into some of the stuff we were talking about before about this, you know, the dynamics of council and how they've changed. This exchange includes Joanne Gignac, Mayor Dilkins, and Jason Raynar, and I want to just play it for you folks for a few minutes. Hopefully this works, and those viewing will be able to also see the council meeting. But take a look at this, and we'll come back in a couple of minutes, and I just want to hear your thoughts on it, folks.
So guys, I just want to jump in here, and Jason, be ready to answer, but I've heard a couple times now that we're hiring all these people before we get the commissioner in place. Jason has mentioned that the commissioner recruitment is ongoing. That will be the first position that's hired. So the commissioner will absolutely have an opportunity to help build the team below them. And I keep hearing there's no report, no details. You have a 100-page report, nearly 100 pages of the implementation plan in front of you. And of the 12 to 14 positions that are, you know, have been identified, they're only really asking to hire 5 today. And they've laid out what they are on page 43 and 44. Laid them out and said, here are the positions that we're going to hire. And they're complementary to the work at Wheatsea, not in conflict or competition with.
You know what, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that. But I hope you can appreciate that you probably wouldn't want to repeat the situation that I participated into when we had to go through eliminating or looking for more cost-efficient ways for this municipality to work. And so we went through a 101-day strike. We went through the contracting out of services that had become so inflated in cost for residents on the local tax bill that what we had to do was horrible. So call me gun shy, call me whatever you want to call me. But in terms of setting up an internal economic development division, after literally I've been through outside, inside, now outside, I think, you know what, these are initiatives that 11 people have to sit in a room and fully explore what it means and what we expect for the dollars that we're going to invest. That's all I'm saying. You can point to the report, and I think it's a great report, but every strategic session that I have participated in as after an election, as being an elected official, I sat with stickers and identified what we were going to move forward with during my 4-year or 3-year term, because I've gone from 3 to 4 years. I walked through with Ms. Wolf and her, you know, the gentleman that lives in Vancouver after, because she couldn't get here from England. And we talked about everything that every councillor had identified. I know the document because it's all of our verbiage, what we've identified as being important to move forward on. What I'm saying to you is, on this one, if I'm approving this today, I'm doing what kind of happened with other things, and we'll talk about that as we go through the other items on the agenda today, where I thought I was approving one thing and it sure grew to something else. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kashat. Jason?
Sorry, Your Worship, I was just going to address what I think is the crux of Councillor Geniak's comments, which are bang on about resourcing. And I just want to try putting it this way to you, and, you know, forgive my crassness, but because council and administration has been so effective at making sure that the resources that are at this city are doing only and exactly what are required to deliver the service level set by council, there is no capacity to do the amazing work that Windsor Works contemplates. And as your CAO, it's critical that I put to you as directly as I can that we cannot move Windsor Works forward, the amazing lift strategy, without significant resources immediately. I know that council understands and appreciates that the work that's involved, even with just this implementation plan, is significant because we want significant results. So
that was the clip. Curious about the reaction that you guys will have. I have some thoughts on it. I selected that clip for a reason, but what do you guys think?
Well, the first thing that jumps out at me is Councillor McKenzie is starting to look like the captain of the Titanic with that crazy beard he's got going on. So he's going to be steering that ship in the right direction, I hope, and avoiding all icebergs.
We love you, Kieran.
He knows we're just kidding with him.
Does he?
No, well, maybe not. I haven't talked to him in a while. Two things that jump out at me on that is kind of what we discussed in one of the previous segments of Councillor Geniak is pretty much disagreeing and arguing a bit with the mayor, which you wouldn't have seen for many years. And for the CAO, I feel two ways about this. I think the CAO is right. If we're going to do these 10-year plans, 20-year studies, how do we change our city? You know, if you're going to do them and they come up with recommendations, you're going to have to pay for them and you're going to have to actually implement them. You're going to have to do them. if you just want to do the study, so you can say, look, we did the study and we'll stick it on a shelf, and then it becomes a campaign thing later. But if you actually want to make change, yeah, you're going to have to fund these things. And if this is, this is the thing we're going to hang our hat on and say, when the Windsor Works study is what we want to do, that's going to change things and to make everything better. Yeah, you got to fund it. I agree with them. I also agree with Councillor Geniak when she goes back and says, I've seen this story before, and it just turns into, it kind of blows up in our face. Then we all have to wear egg on our face the next time, an election comes around. So I don't know. Personally, yeah, I have a hard time with it because to me, I am the cynical one in the show, and I've seen Windsor just screw things up time and time again. Maybe this time it'll be different, new CAO. But I think what the CAO has said is, look, if you're going to want to do this, we have to do it, and this is going to cost money. That's the only way to make this strategy work, if this is the strategy you want to go with.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on those points. I mean, this is going to cost money. You can't avoid that. It's already been produced. What was the point of having a report produced if we weren't going to follow through on that? Well, and as you noted, though, Don, we have many, many reports and master plans that are all shelved and collecting dust, but they're great, great plans. Councillor Geniak, she really went nuclear there. The invocation of the 101-day strike, I thought, was, to me, the most interesting part of that. Just taking it straight up to 11. And then I'll leave it at this, because I know you're going to want to talk about your reasoning for bringing that specific clip, Doug. I thought the CAO, wow, does that guy know how to play politics? I don't want to be crass, but let me go and compliment you all on doing an outstanding job. I mean, that's exactly what he did there. It was a brilliant maneuver. I don't think it'll work for him in the long run, though. I mean, with this council, but it's interesting to see that he's still trying to play the game.
Well, I think, so I took a little bit of a different view of Mr. Raynar's comments. First of all, it is so refreshing to see a member of administration, the leader of administration, pushing back respectfully, diplomatically, and with facts. But it is such a different style from the previous CAO. To see that kind of response to a question from Joanne Geniak, it's not something that I would have expected to see under Honorio Colucci. But beyond that, just sort of frankly stating, we don't have the resources to execute this plan because you have cut us to the bone. I mean, that is how I translate the statement that Mr. Raynar made. That is a level of frankness and a level of self-assuredness that I have not seen before from top administration. So I found that pretty impressive. And I totally agree, John. Geniak went completely nuclear. And when we release this on YouTube, or go and watch that exchange, it happens around the 1 hour 40-minute mark of the council meeting. Watch the faces and the body language. This is not a drawing room debate or a show, some kind of a political show. Geniak and Dilkens are not in agreement on this agenda. Geniak is very much not on side with it, and to your point, basically saying that this is the kind of spending and this is the kind of thing that caused the city to, quote unquote, have to have that divisive and terrible strike, that long strike, with its own workforce. So I don't think it can be understated how different this is from what has gone before. And I wanted to bring it forward because I think it's something that if you are, like most people, are not a watcher of council, if you are a person who reads what's in the media, you might not be picking up on these currents, but they are fascinating. And it's going to be really interesting to watch this unfold. We are less than a year away from the municipal election, and I think you can definitely see folks positioning themselves. And I'm not sure where all this is going to go, but I don't think that next year's election is going to be quite the same as the one 4 years ago.
Do you think, sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you there, John, just kind of a broader question in general, kind of going back to the point I made. Do you feel that, again, to me, Joanna she's looking at this through the lens of the past 20 years or however long she's been on council and the numerous stops and starts and failures. Do you think you can bring in a new CEO who is younger? He worked in a city that kind of did some more progressive things, and they implemented some things that, we only kind of dream about down here. Do you think for Windsor to actually move forward and to make the changes that we've talked about for years and years and years, that it's time for the old councillors who were part of, let's just say, the problem in the past to disappear, and Windsor's not going to be able to move forward until we get a whole new breed of people kind of running, the powers that be down at the city? And we've started with this CAO, and we've, like you said, we've seen how different he is in interacting in these situations, because usually, no offense to our previous CAOs, it was kind of just, yeah, whatever you want. Whereas, CAO Raynar is actually pushing back on some things and telling them their face, if you want change, you have to make change, and it's going to be expensive. And if you're not willing to do that, nothing's going to happen. And you're just going to keep getting, it's going to be same old Windsor, like the same old Detroit Lions. Yeah.
Now, having said that, and I made much the same comments about Raynar, he is on side with his mayor. This is the mayor's agenda, and I think it's important to point that out. He's not freelancing here. He's not going out on a limb where he's offside with the head of council. It's Gignac who is offside with the head of council, and that's just not something that we have seen before. But my only interaction with Jason Raynar has been to see how he conducts himself in these council meetings, and I agree with you, Don. This is a generational change. I don't know what Mr. Raynar's career plans are and how long he'll be here in Windsor, or how long council will see fit to have him in that role. But this is a change in tone and a change in style that is pretty welcome. And I got to say, and this is a little bit of a mea culpa, when he was announced as the new CAO, and we did our research, and if you guys remember, we did an after show on this, and I had a little bit of fun because he was the pay your taxes with Bitcoin guy back in his previous municipality. This is a case where, at least what I've been able to glean so far from his conduct in public, I was too cynical. I was thinking same old. This is another library CEO, or another, this is going to be another hire from outside that blows up in our faces. And the evidence so far would not indicate that was correct. And, maybe bringing that cynical attitude to everything that comes down the pike from the city is not always productive.
And looking back, if we had paid our taxes in Bitcoin, the city would have made about 500% on their Bitcoin investment in the last year and a half. So it was a bloody genius idea that we just failed to grasp. We had an opportunity to raise our tax base by $3 billion. Would have been fantastic.
I always think about that guy who bought a pizza with 8 Bitcoins back in the day.
Yeah, they did a story. Sorry, John. They did a story on him on CNBC where they interviewed him, because his Bitcoin collection now would have been worth $140 million. And he goes, well, I got some pizza out of it. So
it was a pretty good pizza. I mean,
exactly. To him, it was free. So
jokes on every other city that didn't do that, because they could have been sitting on a whole pile of Bitcoins there. I agree with you, Doug. I thought it was I didn't have such high expectations of him either. And it's really refreshing to have, seen that clip and to see that pushback that is occurring, whether or not you agree with, the Windsor Works report or not, but to actually have that level of frankness that's being shown pretty great. It really, really changes up the dynamic.
Well, I think the question is, are we going to see going forward, does the powers that be at city council rein him in with as much pressure as they can to get him on their side and do things like the old Maiden Windsor solution? Or are they going to say, our people, and no offense to Councillor Geniak, she's been a great counselor over the years, but our people, counselors like her, going to say, you know what, my time is up. Things are going in a different direction. And let's let this guy take a shot and do what he's got to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we saw she was offside with this. She was offside with the Festival Plaza. So we're seeing some pretty interesting fractures develop. It'll be a really interesting election coming up, and the season to get into it. I don't know. The one last part, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before, but just going through this story and putting it together, it's reminded again that the entire inception of Windsor Works was on Mayor Dilkin's re-election night. And he looked at his phone and he saw that Oshawa had just had its GM plant shut down, and then went, oh no, that could happen here. I mean, is this a good story for him for it to keep being put out there, that it took the story of something happening in Oshawa that was the unthinkable, but everyone knows could happen, that was the impetus for it? I mean, I don't think that's a great story. I think it's a mayor who was desperately reacting to forces far bigger than him.
Well, if we're going to be jerks about it, and I'm prepared to do that, I think the timing is really interesting. So Mayor Dilkins, at his inaugural speech, made that impassioned speech about Oshawa and the need for change and the need for diversification and how important it was going to be. And then you may remember I spent a couple of years asking where the hell the plan was. It all went into motion early in 2021, just in time for all of this to sort of start to come to fruition and to be announced, and for all those things to happen right before election season. And so not only will it be fresh in everyone's mind that this whole Windsor Works diversification plan was the mayor's brainchild, and it's going to be fresh, and it's going to be an election issue, and it's going to be something that he hangs his hat on. But not only that, but the election will be long over, way before we get any inkling of whether this thing is going to work or not. So it's perfect politically. But this is the question that I want to ask: is the political timing of all of this is excellent if you are Mayor Dilkins and you want to win re-election and you want to use this as a piece of your platform to win re-election. How seriously should we take Mayor Dilkins' commitment when he sat on this thing for a couple of years so that the timing of it would be good for his re-election, instead of pursuing it immediately in 2019 after winning the election and stating on inauguration night that it was the most important issue?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's, are we being jerks? Is that what's going on? Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's a coincidence. Let's just put it that way. This mayor has been known to pretty much try to use everything for political purposes. He's politicized as much as he can for his own purposes. So I can't disagree with that.
I mean, the timing is incredibly suspect, as you've said, Doug. I could see him doing it. I could absolutely see him doing it. And that's a problem. That's a perceptional problem at the very least. And it's a much bigger problem if that is the case. But I don't know. With that, is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about with this?
Yeah, I have one more thing to say. Since we're being jerks, I would like to apologize to Councillor McKenzie for saying he looks like the captain of the Titanic with his new crazy beard, when in all reality, he looks more like the guy on the Highlander Fish Corporation logo. So I would take back what I said about the Titanic. And I would just like Councillor McKenzie to think about all the bald jokes he made over the years. And when you're not on the show anymore and can't come back, I can pretty much say whatever I want there, Captain.
City politics. Come for the takes, stay for the personal insults.
There you go.
Now, were you going to do for your consideration, Don? Nope.
No, we'll save that for another show because actually I think it's a topic we can talk about, and I could throw it out real quick, but let's just save that for another time because it's an election campaign kind of thing anyway.
Well, for your consideration, go read a book or watch something on TV, guys.
Oh, go see Dune. Check it out in the theater, guys, for your consideration.
Good call. I really want to see it at an IMAX. That's the way.
So if we're gonna, I saw it at Lakeshore because Lakeshore cinemas is the best movie watching experience in the city or in the region, I guess, because it's out in Lakeshore. Silver City has the IMAX, they have the 3D, they have all that crap. Lakeshore has absolutely comfortable chairs, a excellent sound system. It's the best place to watch a movie in town.
Did you get your tickets for free for that plug?
No, but I should.
This show is brought to you by the Lakeshore Cinema.
If you're listening, Lakeshore Cinemas, yes, we definitely will accept retroactive bribes.
We will take some free movie passes and we'll plug your little operation out there on this show every week.
Any business, really. We're here to be your shill. Just
come on, Holt, send us some beer, man. That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking for.
Well, with that, we are at the end of the show. This was a really fun one tonight. As I said, just leaving that last segment, we're going to be entering a really interesting period of local politics here, the likes we haven't really seen before, with almost 3 separate camps now forming on council. So stay tuned to that. It's going to be interesting to watch as it all unfolds. It is the 27th of October. Our regular panel tonight included Doug Sartori, Don Merrifield Jr., and myself, John Lidke. Please support us at patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We're in BizX Magazine and at bizxmagazine.com. And Rose City Politics is able to broadcast live on tape thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. We will be back next week, folks.